All right. Well, good afternoon, India, and good evening and good morning to everyone joining us today from different geographies. I am Neha Gupta, Director of the Impact Future Project at Aspire Circle. On behalf of the Aspire team and Impact Future Project's Food, Agri, and AgriTech Impact community, I am thrilled to welcome you all to the unveiling of the annual book featuring the top 10 impact investment ideas. Today is a very special day to us as well because we are releasing this research report on the Indian National Farmers' Day. These impact investment ideas have been curated and co authored by the Agri community to bring India closer to its impact future. We are sharing our feed live on Aspire's YouTube handle as well. I would like to get started by introducing you all to this spectacular community of entrepreneurs, founders, investors, government and media representatives who met and collaborated several times over the last 1 year for the outcome that we are sharing with the world today. So here is the community at a quick glance. Thank you, leaders, for your time and for making this book a success and true today. I will now invite Amit Bhatia, the founder and managing trustee of Aspire Circle, for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Neha, and thank you everyone for joining us. The whole meeting will take less than an hour, and we know it's a time to end the year, and you have a lot of things to close. But we wanted to make sure that our most, spectacular of all the research pieces we did gets released in 2021, and you will shortly learn why. But those of you who are joining us for the first time, I do want to say to you that, look, we embarked upon this ambitious project called the Impact Future Project last year. And our core purpose is to catalyze the imminent impact economy, which will embed the idea of impact as an economic concept like risk and return in every business, investment, policy, and consumption decision. And we wanted it to be a collaborative platform, to advance research and knowledge, awareness, advocacy, education, and training. And we assembled 200 CEOs, investors, thought leaders in 10 different sectors to come together and create the research, which we have been launching since this beginning of this last quarter. This is our fifth launch. We have launched our book on financial inclusion, fintech. We have launched on education and edtech, on disabilities, on water waste management. And today we are doing food, agri, and agtech. And as you will see very shortly, one of the most interesting findings that our research will have is on that the sizing of the private sector, in terms of investment and revenues in agriculture was not well done in India. So this is the first attempt and, to do such a thing. And you will see collective revenues of all the private sector companies, private sector only, by 2030 is going to touch $1 trillion, twice the size of the total BFSI, financial inclusion, fintech. And I think this just one insight often misses us how big and deep the agri sector is. And because of the fragmentation and the lack of attention this sector gets, we just don't always appreciate the full size and scale of the agri-tech sector. Now, as you look at the numbers, which you will hear shortly from our leaders who collaborated multiple times, you will find a couple of very interesting features. One, that the absolute amount of growth is actually less than what we have been talking about other sectors. So, for example, BFSI financial inclusion was going to treble over the next 10 years, but food, agri, ag tech is only going to double. So, but it will still touch way more people in India, about 1.3 billion compared to 1.1 billion in finance, banking, financial inclusion. Most importantly, you're going to hear about 10 different ideas which we believe have a huge potential for this decade. These include dairy farming, sustainable forestry, water soil management, farm mechanization, cold chain, climate risk mitigation. There's food fortification, plant-based proteins, bio inputs, and vertical farming. And collectively, between all of these ideas, you will see that we believe that India is going to catalyze annually about $272 billion of investment annually by 2030. So that's the promise of this sector. That's why we are here together to kind of look at and talk about these opportunities. Now, this growing private investment and integration that we're going to see in this coming decade, this is not just attractive, but this is going to really put our agri sector at par with some of the best in the world. And I think you're going to see a chain of how technology and automation are going to permeate different investment themes. On this note, I just want to thank all our leaders again for giving us their time and attention. We found great co-chairs. Both of them are here today, and I just want to highlight and thank Purnima Khandelwal and Jinesh Shah. We found in PricewaterhouseCoopers a great knowledge partner, and I see Ashok here, Ashok Verma. He led the PricewaterhouseCoopers team. So the research you see is one of the first time India trying to put together through a collaboration of 30 odd leaders, 10 investment themes, sizing the revenues, investments, people impacted, jobs created, and bringing to you this wonderful research. Thank you all for your contribution, and I hope you will all enjoy listening to some of these stunning findings as I enjoyed, collaborating with all these wonderful leaders. So Neha, back to you.
Thank you, Amit. Well, I will now request our knowledge partner, as Amit just introduced him, Ashok Verma, to present a sector overview. Thereafter, the co-chairs of Agri Community, Purnima Khandelwal and Jinesh Shah. Purnima is the co-founder at INI Farms, and Jinesh, the co-founder and managing partner, Omnivore, to present the findings of the report. So Ashok, over to you.
Ashok, you're on mute, I guess.
Can you unmute? Yeah, sorry. Am I audible now?
Yes, Ashok, you are.
Okay, yeah. Thanks, Amit. And I would like to thank Amit and Aspire team for giving us this opportunity to act as the knowledge partner for this very, very, I would say, important initiative, this entire Impact Future project. So this project has been conceptualized with an idea that in each of the sectors, we were looking at 10 ideas. And in agri sector as well, we were looking at the food, agri and agri-tech as areas which we focused upon. And 10 ideas were curated. And subsequently, these 10 ideas were further developed into, I would say, very, very practical action points, investment areas, looking at specific parameters, which were like potential economic growth, the unique problem it was addressing for the industry as a whole, its contribution to the SDG, and also impact on the livelihoods and employment. And we met as a group every quarter looking at 3 or more ideas, and the different stakeholder group, I would say, glad to be in company of these eminent thinkers and group of people drawn from different stakeholder groups, such as investor community, academicians, researchers, entrepreneurs, government representatives, the donor agencies, and various other think tanks. And it was really enriching for us to actually discuss these ideas and try to further develop and fine-tune them. So if I can actually move on to in terms of the importance of agriculture in India is something which is already laid down by Amit. So I'm not getting into the details of that. Essentially, if you look at agriculture, definitely we are, as a country, are progressing in leaps and bounds. And we are largest producers of spices, pulses, milk, second largest producer of wheat, rice, tea, fruits, and vegetables. And if you look at in last one decade, I would say more than one decade, maybe from 2010 onwards, we have seen that we have become self-sufficient in terms of the food security. That meant that the contribution of agriculture to the exports also have increased. So what it used to be around 8.5% in FY, I would say 2010, that has grown to around close to around 13 to 14% in FY20. So when we were looking at all of these ideas, we were looking at different value chain within the agriculture. So in the pre-production stage, we were looking at how we are enhancing the productivity, also preserving the natural resources, because sustainability is something which we have kept in mind when we were looking at some of these ideas. So the better water and soil management practices, adopting bio inputs for safer and sustainable farming were some of the things which we looked at as an idea. At the production stage, we were looking at how some of modern practices could be brought in into the farming itself, which is more like farm mechanization, and also improving the farm gate infrastructure, which could actually lead to a significant improvement in terms of the production capacity itself. And the post-production, it was largely around the cold chain and the integrated logistics. We also looked at some of the elements which is closely linked to the food agriculture, which is the nutrition aspect. So we also focused on the fortification of foods and seeds, both the biofortification and the other fortifications which we could do on the product side itself. Some of the thematic areas which we looked at are dairy, vertical farming, hydroponics, climate risk mitigation in agriculture. All of these were some of the ideas which we looked at as a group. And like what we were talking about in terms of the total investment, if you are looking at around close to 400 billion which USD, which we are expecting in agriculture space in 2030. Out of that, close to around 270 billion is going to come from these top 10 ideas. So from there, you can realize the importance of these 10 ideas we are talking about. We sincerely hope that this entire report and this entire study would be useful for multiple stakeholders like government, businesses, farmers, community-based organizations, startups, technology providers, in embarking on this journey to create a sustainable impact in the agriculture sector. Thank you. Neha, back to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ashok. So now I'll request Dinesh to take us through the findings of the report.
Hey, thanks, Neha. Thanks, Amit and Ashok for setting the context. I mean, this was a great opportunity for us to talk about, at least think about agriculture, how it's going to look in next 10 years, right? And it's fascinating to see how each idea in agriculture sector could be a multi-billion-dollar opportunities, right? I mean, if you just take the case of the first idea what we listed, the dairy farming. I mean, dairy represents like nearly 4 to 5% of India's GDP or 25% of India's agriculture GDP. And what is fascinating about this sector is that in spite of such a higher base, the dairy output continues to grow. I mean, the number of stakeholders involved in the sector are increasing. And we are seeing a significant amount of tech coming into it, right? So it's really a confluence of the large market, huge stakeholders, and technology adaptation, including digitization. It's going to change the way how dairy is going to look, right? I mean, it will continue to be the India's biggest agri crop. We have it, right? I mean, had a chance to discuss many ideas, and we chose 10, right? And it was a difficult job for us to even figure out the top 10, right? Because every idea looks fascinating. I mean, one of the other ideas what we talked about was water and soil management. I mean, we know for the fact that agriculture needs water and soil, and these two components are in a bloody nuisance right now, right? I mean, we have soil quality dropping by the day, water table dropping by the day, and if India doesn't change or doesn't solve its problem, we will have a problem for the agri sector as a whole, right? And the climate change is not helping us. So we think the water and soil management, which was completely ignored for last many years, is going to see a significant amount of investment. And if you're going to solve this, it's going to create a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. And if Indian startups and Indian entrepreneurs and Indian enterprises are able to even resolve piece of the water and soil issues, this can create a significant fight for India against the climate change, right? It's fascinating to see how things are. I mean, we also spoke about things like cold chain and logistics, right? I mean, everyone talks about India's agriculture sector doubling up, but without the infrastructure in place, the logistics, the cold chains, I mean, the warehousing in place, it's going to be a difficult job. And we are seeing a lot of the young startups trying to disrupt the way how things are, right? I mean, for once we are seeing startups really talking about decentralized ways of rather than centralized way of storage and logistics, right? And this something is going to throw a lot of opportunities. I mean, we think there is a huge potential upside in everything we are doing. I mean, the other two ideas, what I'm going to talk about is sustainable forestry and farm mech. I mean, sustainable forestry is something which we generally ignore it out, right? But if we look at the data points, it's such a large component of the agri GDP, and it's a natural fight. If you're able to get our forestry right, it's a natural fight of against the climate change what we have it, right? So whatever we're doing in agriculture, if you're not able to make a sustainable practice, it's going to make the agriculture sector more and more challenging, right? And we think if you are doing in the right manner, it's going to throw a lot of opportunities. I mean, farm mech and farmware infrastructure is so counterintuitive in a country with 1 billion plus people. I mean, 40% of Indians focus on agri sector. We are still facing an issue of labor, right? The farm labor is getting reduced day by day, and this is also going to throw a huge opportunity. I think overall, all the 5 ideas I think will has a chance to create a significant impact in the agri in the future. So these are the top 5 ideas. I mean, Neha, over to you. I want to take it forward.
Thank you, Janesh. Thank you very much. I request Purnima to take us through the next 5 ideas, please. Purnima, you're perhaps on mute in case you're speaking.
Sorry, I was not able to unmute myself for some reason. So, good afternoon, everybody. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And these 4 quarters have been a lot of learning for, I think, all of us. Janesh and Ashok have spoken a little bit about, how we approach this. And Amit has laid down the foundation around what this ecosystem is all about, right? What this sector is all about. And, I think the overall approach that we took to this agri-ag-tech sector was around a value chain approach. And the 5, heads that Janesh, or the themes that Janesh just spoke about, if you just look at it, they were all very linked to the production, the farming side of things, right from farm soil, water, going into farm level mechanizations, going into cold chain, and then, of course, dairy as a separate vertical and theme. The 5 that I'm going to be talking about right now, climate risk, protected cultivation go hand in hand in my mind a little bit, because one of the ways in which we are looking to mitigate the risks around climate is driven by the fact that, India is largely an open field cultivation setup. And if we were to, in some sense, also look at how we are wanting to mitigate this risk, it is around protected cultivation and vertical farming. All of these have their own set of opportunities, and that is how, as a group, we looked at these themes to say that what is the need, what is the overall opportunity that it presents to the entire ecosystem here in India. And we looked at all of these in the backdrop of what is happening globally, but clearly focused on India-centric problems that we want to solve, right? So that is how we went about looking at this. The three that you see, which is food fortification, plant-based proteins, and bioinputs, are actually themes which are driven by the customer side of it. Ashok spoke about food security, which was an issue we were grappling with some time back. Today, we've moved to food safety. A lot of these themes are actually being driven by what is it that the consumer is asking for? What is it that the market wants? And therefore, how is it that the entire value chain needs to rethink about what needs to be done, whether it is at the field level, whether at post-harvest, or whether just in terms of the food that we are looking to consume. So food fortification, for example, right? A very new concept to the to Indians, I would say. Similarly, plant-based proteins, but the way it is gaining traction, the way it is growing, it's phenomenal. When we looked at all of these opportunities, including bioinputs, it's primarily coming from the perspective that people want to know what's going into my food, right? The use of pesticides is a large concern, and therefore this whole movement around bioinputs, all of these are massive opportunities. And that is why, as a group, we shortlisted them, we deliberated, we talked about them in terms of the kind of investments these require, what is the horizon. We also looked at time horizon, which are the ideas that are investable today, which are for tomorrow, and which are for day after. So just as you look at the table on the right hand side of the screen, it beautifully captures the investments, the revenue, and the lives that eventually get impacted with all of these initiatives and themes that as a group we spoke about. So just summarizing, the top two ideas on this particular slide, they require something like $15 to $20 billion of investment and creating $25 billion of revenue and impacting like something like 100 million lives. Now, what is the scale and quantum that we're talking about, and what kind of impact these ideas overall can create? So, with that, I will hand it over back to Neha, but it's been an absolute pleasure. And I'm sure when you guys get to see the report with lot more details, with lot more meat into, what was talked about and what was deliberated and discussed. So thank you so much. Over to you, Neha.
Thank you, Purnima. Thank you, Jinesh and Ashok. Friends, I would now like to introduce Partha Sarthi Biswas, Assistant Editor at the Indian Express. Partha is a commodity and business journalist with over a decade's experience and expertise in data-driven work. He is passionate about AgriTech. Partha will anchor the next segment and engage business leaders and special guests of the Agri community at Impact Future Project in an interactive dialogue. At this time, I will also request the audience to please send your questions to us via the chat box or personally to me for the Q&A session, which is immediately after this interactive dialogue. So Partha, over to you.
Thank you, Neha. It's a war between the journalist in me and the moderator in me in asking questions, because this report and the ideas presented, they are like a mine house of information and stories for me. But I'll wear my moderator's hat for the time being and maybe ask the journalist to take a break. So my first question is to Ashok. Dairy is the biggest of our agri subsectors, and you correctly said that someone said that it's around 25% of the agricultural GDP. So we have already seen a creation of a $5 billion Amul. Dudla Dairy also had just gone public with 0.5 billion market cap. What is preventing us from creating more Amuls? How many and where will you put your bets on more Amuls, Ashok?
Yeah, I think, thanks, Partha. That's an interesting question. In fact, you're right. If you look at dairy sector, I would say contribute roughly around 30% of the overall gross value addition, which is happening in the agriculture sector. And it has been also growing at significantly, I would say, a larger growth rate compared to the other segments, subsectors of the agriculture, which is close to around 12 to 15% is what it has been growing over last 5 years. One of the challenge which we have faced, let me first come to the challenge and then I'll come to how we can create more Amuls. One of the challenge which we had is, if you look at the dairy farmers, they are largely very small and marginal farmers. Around 87% of the farmer group, you'd say that small and marginal farmers. And in a cooperative setup like Amul, it flourished. What has not happened in past few years is in terms of how the private sector could actually play along with these set of people and look at how they can gel well with this entire value chain of small and marginal farmers and organize them and get them to actually be supplier base for their own system. So that is something which has not happened. And that is one of the challenges which has there. And one of the other challenge I would say, though we are the largest milk producer in the country, if you look at our productivity, it is approximately, our cattle productivity is close to around 6 liters per day, whereas it is approximately around 35 liters per day for a US farmer. So for from cattle from US. So that essentially gives that entire productivity issue which is there in our system. And this is only going to change if you have a lot of investment which is there in the entire value chain. And we should not only be looking at the final milk or the value-added product which is coming from the milk, but it is more on the entire value chain. That is starting from the animal breeding to production to collection of produce and then the retail itself. So if that is happening, it is definitely going to actually lead to more number of Amuls to be present in. And there are umpteen number of examples like Hudson Agro, Milky Mist and others who are actually doing well. And they all maybe in next, I would say 5 to 10 years would be the starts in the stock market and also maybe in the entire dairy segment. Focus would be definitely on moving away from only the liquid milk, but also creating more value-added product on the dairy. So that would be the, I would say, the path for the dairy in future. Thanks, Partha.
It's very interesting that you mentioned Hudson, because I think they are one of the only dairies who have invested in fodder development. Along with TNAU, they have developed this protein-rich fodder, which has reduced the cost of production of dairy farmers. So next we move on to Hemendra. Hemendra, my question to you is, in a labor-intensive and labor surplus market like India, it must be hard to build a rationale for mechanization, as cost benefits will simply not work. Where is India when benchmarked to agri-tech heavy countries like Israel on mechanization?
Thanks, Partha. Good question. All I want to say when it comes to agriculture, we are not labor surplus, we are labor starved. And that starvation is only going up with farmer's son doesn't want to become farmer. So I think we need to address that with some bit of urgency. And another factor that you should think through when you talk about mechanization, that average age of Indian farmer is probably closer to 50 years. Huh? So we are definitely losing a lot of masculine labor, which was used in field crops especially. And the significant part of agriculture also becoming feminine, especially vegetables, some bit of fruits, and most of dairy is already feminine. So so we need to redefine the way we look at farmers and probably develop mechanical solutions. And there's absolutely huge potential for innovation, both product and service. On the product side, on one end, we need mechanical tools for land leveling, for seed drilling, for de-weeding, etc. Ideally, in a price band of $200 to $500, which farmer is willing to pay and can sort of, can recover that cost in 1 or 2 crop cycles. So that's one end of the spectrum. And on the other end, use of robotics, computer vision, which we see, and also drones, which of course high capex equipments, and I don't think most of the farmers can't afford it, but we can build pay-per-use solutions, and farmers are willing to pay for that, because I think the one case in point is harvester, where farmer pays 1600 to 2400 rupees an hour, because despite paying that amount, he still saves a lot of money, which he has to pay to a labor, and usually labor is not available at the time of harvest. So I think there is huge opportunity to build new products for Indian farms, and also service innovations. How do you make it viable? Like cold storage as a service, harvesting as a service, pesticide spray as a service. So we can create a lot of models. In fact, a lot of agri-business players. Last 6 months, I'm working more with agri-businesses than AgriTech. I can tell you, they all are moving from a product company to service companies now, trying to build those service solutions, and that's where these tools become interesting. We are seeing a lot of interest in drones already. We need to build drone capacity. We are very short of it, both on hardware and our capabilities to do drone application of agri inputs and drone application for data collection, etc. So yes, I think interesting opportunity. And last but not the least, opportunities of mechanization on the post-harvest side. I think that's another area which need automation, especially packing, sorting, grading, which you can set up in sort of a small amount, ideally less than 5 lakhs. There are enough village level entrepreneurs who can probably invest in it and can operate it. If some startup or some corporate can work with them and can promise some bit of market linkage, those models start looking very, very interesting. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Hemendra. Before I put the spotlight on Rajat, I would just like to add a small anecdote from my fields. Hemendra talked about farmer's son not willing to become a farmer. In Maharashtra, a farmer does not get a wife easily. So if you're a farmer, it's a search for you. It is really tough for you to get married. So many of them don't want to take a farming or write farming in their CV because they don't get married easily. Well, that shows the state of Indian agriculture, unfortunately. My question to Rajat would be, water and soil investing is amongst the early winners in the sector, with companies like Jain Irrigation getting $2 billion revenues. What investment themes in water and soil will continue to attract investors?
Partha, thank you so much. And if you can hear me, I think I'll take the cue from you when you said the farmers were not getting married, right? So when I think the startup movement actually started up in India way back, that's when, parents said, if you are going to be a startup, nobody will marry you, nobody will give you money. But you can see the difference in scenario today, where we are. And I think if you really look at today where we are, I think last year, the industry on the whole got about 40, 45, 50 billion, and keep aside some large amounts which came to one particular telecom and retail sector. But today, in the 11 months, India has already received about $65 billion of PCVE investments, which is probably the largest we've seen, and it's going to continue only. Now, having said that, the agriculture sector, and this is one of our members of IVCA, so we represent the association for all the fund management industry. So one of the members that actually highlighted, who is very keen on the Agri space, he said about $725 million has come over the last 5 years into the sector. But in the last 11 months alone, the same amount has been invested into India. So clearly there is a significant, opportunity and growth which is happening in India. Again, you mentioned about, our question, and which is a very well thought on water and soil, investing and how it's going on. So as we can see that today, probably India is 18% of the global population, but has only access to 4% of global water. Now, and certainly the percentage will not change. Only the population will grow. So it'll become very critical area for all of us. Today, I think the fund management industry kind of has taken a note of this. And there are large number of startups. There's still not enough number of startups. If I would say, probably there are about 400, 500 startups which are solving a large farming household challenge. But there are like 40, 50,000 startups which are, solving a lot of urban related problems. But step by step, I think this focus is going to come in. And really during this, the agri investments really took a big one, a lot of investments you could see during the pandemic period as well. Now, a lot of the funds, when we are looking at startups, and I think what they're looking at, the people or startups who are providing solution for water usage, drying up water bodies, low yielding, soils, etc. How do reservoirs, watershed management? So these are some of the need of the hour, and I think that's where we will look at startups who are probably at the first mile with the farmer to actually have a mobile first IoT, AI, ML. These are standard to solve the problems in a real time kind of state. That's how we are looking at this particular industry. And even the startups who focus on reducing water footprints for crops, I think they are high on investment radar. So, I think that's where it, and I think you also mentioned about, I think, was it gen irrigation, right? So now really this is an old company which probably has, is in about 100 plus countries. And some of us can look at it as a role model for the agri sector. Because I think they've done fairly and significantly well there, Partha. So I hope I've answered your question further there. So yeah, I hope I've back to you, Partha.
Thank you. My next question is to Apurva. As India attempts to reduce wastage, we have to build a significant cold chain. Are the economics attractive for large-scale cold chains in India? Do micro and small refrigeration facilities have a future? Apurva?
You're on mute, Apurva.
So you compared this, how do you create another Amul? And what is, we keep on talking about the cooperative stuff, but the major, I think, achievement of Amul was the introduction of technology right from the village level right up to market level.
Yes.
So and I mean since I was involved in it, so I can talk about it. But so you had a electronic milko tester. The first electronic device ever to enter into our villages was the electronic milko tester 30 years ago. Okay. And then you had the cold chains, so you had milk tankers which were fully insulated. Then you had the pasteurization plants. Then you had the milk chilling centers. And now you have, I just attended the last conclave at Anand and Amul recently. And, Amul was making a presentation. And there are these brilliant now solar powered milk chillers of very different small capacity. And to me, that is the unspoken or the untold story of the milk revolution, is the brilliance of the cold chains. And so, therefore, it's very clear that if vegetables and fruits don't, if you want to avoid this 30-40% wastage which is there, that is the path we will have to take. I think we've done some experiments and you don't have to go into very high investment cold chains. So there is a startup called Rukat, for example. They do these very non-powered cold storage vegetables, which will store for about 5-6 days. So if you break up the whole from the production to the market, if you break it up into different locations, then and look at different levels of aggregation, then you can do very smart investments, which the high investment which fits the high volume at different locations. So I see, first of all, huge potential in not the large, high cost storage places, but in a large number of small, low-cost storages. And that, whether it's Rukat or whether it's Mitti Cool, which starts at the village level, then you do a solar-powered, which we have tried out in Bihar, solar-powered 5-ton refrigeration or cold storage unit at a slightly larger place, and then move to capacities and take it up. I think that will change the scene in terms of the things which we import. We have farmers who can produce almost anything in this country. So you can, stop all these exotic vegetable and fruit imports which take place. We can almost close it down entirely because some of the prices I see are like crazy. And, and I know farmers who would do a much better job at doing it if only they had this cold chain. So yes, from a business perspective, I think there is a huge, because there are niche crops where cold chains will make a huge difference in the value add and be good for the private sector, it will be good for the retailer, and it will be good for the farmer. So I think this a good value chain, a cold chain, in vegetables and fruits is actually a plus for all the three players involved in this sector, and I think there is huge potential.
Thank you. You mentioned Amul and you mentioned the technology coming to the village. When our policymakers were scratching their heads for cold chain for the COVID vaccine, I think dairy had a solution. We have been using AI in liquid nitrogen since like pre-independence, and that cold chain has been successful, and we have seen the success of that. So something as simple as that, but as effective as you correctly mentioned, can hold the key to this strategy.
Let me just add one thing. Yesterday, I like watching Shark Tank, right? So yesterday there were two women who landed up with a machine which tests the ripeness or the quality of apples in a what we call non-invasive way. So it's just like it's like your what is it called? The thing which you do your diabetes testing. You just put that counter against an apple, and in about 2 minutes, they could say whether the apple was worth eating or not worth eating. They could tell you the grade of ripeness of a banana. They could tell you the quality, brick quality of sweetness of a fruit, all through this non-invasive technology. I was so fascinated by it. So if you have these kind of technologies available at the grassroots level, like you have in milk, you would be able to instantly accept and reject good quality fruits at the farm level, at the base level with this kind of mobile technologies. And therefore, the cold chain would also carry much lesser load, because then high quality fruits and vegetables would go in a high value cold chain. The remaining can be done for processing, etc. So if it happens at the grassroots level like the Milko tester did, I think you can have a revolution. So I'm very gung-ho on the use of technology for changing the face of Indian agriculture.
Thank you. My next question is to Joanna. The promise of seed or food fortification offers a radical solution of fixing issues like malnutrition. What success has India seen in pursuing fortification commercially and addressing social challenges? Is Joanna there?
Hi, Partha. Yes.
Hi.
Thanks for that. Fortification can just make huge mammoth difference. And malnutrition and lack of malnutrition is not something that's just in the poorer communities. It's in the wealthier groups as well. And a really good example is where in India, we have more than 50% of all women in reproductive age being anemic. And it's massive, and that goes across poorer and wealthier sectors, and that's basically usually based on having lack of iron. What's amazing, one of the amazing things about fortification is that it can be done at different stages of the value chain. So you can do fortification, which is typically called biofortification, right at the seed end. So you can do that through selection, just selecting the varieties of the crops that have the higher nutrient levels. And a really good example is millets, where just by selecting the right variety, you can triple or quadruple the amount of iron in that millet just by the right selection of the variety. But also breeding. Breeding is another area where in the past we bred for yield or resilience to drought, etc., whereas now they're starting to breed to also include looking at the nutrition level, and that's quite a new area. And what's amazing about the investment of biofortification is it's a one-off investment, and then you've got it forever. So huge impact you can get from that one-off investment. But then you can fortify food when you're actually doing the processing part of the food as well. And you can do that through natural additives, or they use artificial additives as well. And so one of the next steps that really is needed, and it's all being talked about now, is about how you can brand that and how you label it. Because one thing with fortification of food, or the biofortifications, you can't see it. You can't see the nutrients. So how does the consumer know what's there? How can you make that a market value that you're adding? So there's a whole new area going into that as well. Even the biofortified area, there's new initiatives right now to get that in codex and how we create brands around it as well. So yeah, a big big new area. And of course, we know with COVID that nutrition has just escalated in interest for everybody, and the food that we eat. And so there's a big potential here for investment.
Thank you. My next question is to Uday. This question alarms me and excites me at the same time, and it's about plant protein. So companies like Beyond Meat and Absolute Burger have shown dramatic acceptance and surreal market capitalizations. Beyond Meat, with around $450 million revenues, has a market cap around of 4.5 billion. Can Indian companies pursuing plant-based proteins expect to replicate such feats? And I would just like to get some more detail about this, and maybe you can add about how big is this market of plant-based protein, because when I talk to poultry farmers, many of them are pretty scared about this new trend of plant-based proteins.
Yeah, thanks, Partha. Okay, so I think it's quite complicated to give a straight answer. I think in terms of can we get these valuations, of course, I think Indian valuations are higher than the West. So valuation is possible. Can we get a company with that much revenue in this space? I think is doubtful for a couple reasons. I think current price points for, say, Beyond Meat are too high for the Indian market. I think the consumers who would like to try this are limited in India, partly because Indians don't eat a very meat-heavy diet. So even Indians who eat meat have a pretty well balanced. So meat is a small portion of their food. And then the people who might have never had meat are not really looking to eat something that feels and looks like meat, right? So I think the plant protein business in India, to maybe answer your later part of the question, will not really compete with, say, the guys who are eating chicken or lamb or whatever. It will compete more in like protein powder or protein additives. And that's where you're seeing a huge increase in the pea protein space. But in terms of, having, like aloo tikki at McDonald's will not be replaced by plant-based, substitute. That's my view. And I'm sure this is a topic where everybody has a personal view, but I think the data will support sort of what I'm saying. Thanks.
Aloo tikki at McDonald's or a veg burger at KFC really doesn't make sense, but then mentioned data is the king. My next question is to Asitawa. Traditional fertilizer and pesticides don't make it to the race of the sustainability movement. Is the movement for bio inputs and sustainable farming gathering momentum? Are pesticides on their way out?
Yeah, hi Partha, can you hear me well?
Yeah, I can hear you well.
Very good. So yeah, that's a good question. And again, it's a complicated question, and it would be quite difficult to give a straight answer. But yes, sustainability is here to stay. As Purnima was saying, that consumers and markets will drive sustainability and the drive towards bio inputs and organic food. On a lighter note, there may be a day 50 years from now when it might be difficult to get a wife or a husband if you're not a organic food eater. So, but it will take some time. This transition is not going to happen overnight, and in the next many years, we clearly see coexistence of chemical and non-chemical input. Just like human beings needs medicines if they're sick, plants also need these chemicals and non-chemicals as protection. But it has, just like medicine, it has to be given in the right dose at the right time, in the right format, following norms. If you don't do that, then there is a danger. But if you follow the norms, which are very clearly mentioned in the label and leaflet of pesticides, just like in medicines, there is very little risk if you are following the norms. So I would say the solution right now is more in integrated pest management, IPM, in judicious and safe use. When I say that, I mean to say apply the product as per instruction, wear personal protection kits and all those things which are given. Also, use new technology. For example, both the product and the service technologies I'm talking about. So innovation plays a massive role in crop protection, just like in pharmaceuticals. Incentives given for newer, better, safer, more effective products is going to be very critical. And India happens to be one of those few countries where regulatory data protection is not there at this point of time, which is one of the impediments of bringing new innovation. And lastly, technologies like drones for pesticide spraying. Hemendra was talking about it. Very recently, Government of India has come out with those standard operating process and guidelines, which I am very happy if there is a scope. But those are sustainable future ways of reducing and mitigating the risk. But in the short term, there are many things which will make chemical products stay. We have seen many disease attacks in the recent past, in the distant past, like locust, like fall armyworm, and there is no solution but to use those. Climate change is going to bring more and more different kind of pests, and we have seen that low use of agrochemical is one of the reasons for crop productivity being low globally. So, we can't take risk on food security and the farmers' livelihood and income just by, kind of dreaming about a chemical-less world in the next, few decades to come. We have to be practical and pragmatic. And also there is a very strong regulatory checks and balance system in place. It takes almost 6 years and a dossier which is about 20,000 pages with all sorts of test results for a product to be first of all registered to be introduced in the market. There is a full authority doing that job. Then there are licensing mechanism, where you get a license to sell a pesticide in a particular state. Then you have inspectors in the field who can take samples and investigate your product. Then there is a product review mechanism by which products are reviewed periodically, and 55 products have been either banned or phased out by Indian authorities in the recent past. So the focus is on innovation, and I must also say that India is one of the lower users of agrochemical. We use about 0.3 kg per hectare compared to China, US, Japan. Some of those countries use about 13 kg per hectare. Our number of molecules in India is just 282 registered molecules. When I say molecules, I mean active ingredients, compared to 1100 which are available worldwide. And green chemistry has improved over a period of time. In the 80s, product used to have about 1 to 3 kg active ingredients per hectare, whereas it has come down to less than 100 grams now, which is why I said it being an R&D driven industry where companies spend just for one product introduction 2,000 crores, $300 million over a period of 10 years. That is how R&D intensive this industry is. So getting newer, better products, using sustainable ways of applying them, following IPM has to go hand in hand along with this bio input and bio pesticide and biostimulant movement, which is also picking up, I must say. Many companies are very keen about those businesses as future opportunities. I hope that helps.
Yeah, that does. And as you correctly mentioned, its coexistence is the key to survival. Most farmers do use organic and chemical fertilizers for better yields and for better soil health. My next and last question would be to Anurag. In smaller and Western European countries and in cities and in deserts, we have seen protected cultivation and vertical farming. Does it have a future in India?
Partha, I think we evaluated this area in great detail during this whole journey of publishing this book, and it is one of the reasons why it is a little bit lower in the hierarchy of what we thought is is quickly possible, is largely because vertical farming and using technologies to enable that, etc., is still largely led by a combination of two factors, right? One is the ability to produce a reasonable variety of products. For example, right now, if you see, vertical farming is largely based on exotic products. I wouldn't even call them organic. I would say within organic, the more exotic high-end products. And the second is that, vertical farming by itself, while it is at a very macro level seems to be the need of the hour, the issue is that it does need a reasonably large amount of support from the government, from local authorities to be able to sort of do that at some scale. It does not help if you have a tiny vertical farm. The physical produce is too small to sustain even a tower in a Gurgaon or in a Bombay, right? You need physical volume of food, and therefore the exotic sort of bent. And therefore, I think there is a lot of work needed here to, I would say, evangelize this, or to sort of lobby with the local authorities to make this a more, to have policies, to have some sort of a procedure which allows these to be made quickly with quick permissions, etc. And I think only then will this really take off. Otherwise, it will stay in the domain of exotics. By definition, therefore, more expensive, and therefore, by definition, almost guaranteed to have less offtake compared to, say, a normal produce, right? If vertical farming was used, at least speaking for myself, I'm sure some people in cities must have experienced this during the pandemic. We had a reasonably decent supply from hydroponic farms, at least during some of the stages of the full lockdown. Very expensive, I would say 2.5 times more expensive than even the high price products at that point in time. I'm guessing it is still 2 times as expensive. And therefore, India being so value conscious, unless that is brought down, which almost always means that someone in the government will have to enable it through policies to get the prices down. If some startup is doing it using brute force, hiring a building and then trying to put things together, that is almost impossible to financially sort of justify over a period of time, right? Some subsidy, some sort of support will have to be given. I think unless that happens, while there will be a more fringe upper class type of takeoff which will happen, I don't think even the middle class or the lower upper class will sort of start taking from there. That is my view. I don't know what you think of that.
No, thank you. I do agree with you on that. And thank you everyone for participating in this. And I think my takeaway from this is going to be more interaction from the ground and lots of technology going bottoms down. I mean, we have the technology at the top, it has to go to the ground, and a lot of interaction has to happen with the startups, the tech companies from the ground, because the solutions you're dealing with, the problems that you are going to answer is from the ground. And the more you interact and more you understand the complex world of Indian agriculture, I think better suited products would come out from your labs and your blue boards. Thank you. And may I ask Neha to take over?
Thank you, Partha. Thank you so much. Well, I'm delighted you could all join us today. Please download the Impact Future Projects Agri report on our website. 4 other impact reports have been launched also in the FinTech, EdTech, wash and waste management, and accessibilities, disability, and inclusion sectors. These are available on the website as well. At the end of each report is a list of 100 startups and investors to see the momentum in each idea. We are here to serve the cause of impact leadership and an impact ecosystem development. And to further the impact revolution in India, we're delighted to announce India's first impact education program. The Impact Specialist Program is a 40-hour in-person program in Delhi NCR between 21st and 25th February next year to prepare you for the imminent shift from ESG sustainability to impact capitalism. The program teaches practical skills to design, build, scale, and manage impact, and is jointly certified by University of Chicago and Aspire Impact. So I will end the day today with a short video on the Impact Specialist Program. Thank you all for your time today, and thank you for joining us.
Since the beginning of this century, with the advent of Millennium Development Goals, triple bottom line, principles of responsible investment, and Nobel Prizes for Muhammad Yunus and Al Gore for social entrepreneurship and climate action respectively, we have seen the momentum built around a global impact movement, which will bring measurable impact alongside risk and return to the forefront of business, investment, policy, and consumption decisions.
Technology enables us to measure the impacts of companies in a granular way and to analyze their impact performance in a similar way to their profits. Some governments will mandate the publication of impact-weighted financial accounts.
Impact investing came into being, where you come up with a very clear statement, I want to make impact, and then you demonstrate how you will make an impact. And an investor who chooses you because you are doing these two things makes you an impact investor.
So yes, the crisis has made all of us shift direction.
We talked about the Chief Impact Officer. It's the common name, but others may have Chief Engagement Officers. They're ways to be trained for people who hold that C-suite office. I look forward to being there the last week of February 2022, where we will be launching this week-long training to develop leadership, particularly around Chief Impact Officers and a whole new leadership for the 21st century.
The world needs a new cadre of impact leaders who can be Sherpas in the journey of their organizations, corporations and financial institutions, nonprofits and regulators to ensure compliance, manage ESG, sustainability and impact risks, deliver optimized, impact-weighted profits, manage organizational impact branding, innovate, be future-ready, and demonstrate highest levels of global citizenship. They must be able to design, build, scale, and manage impact. They will be the future Chief Impact Officers.
Thank you all for joining. And I have a few questions regarding the program already. So I have a few questions already on my personal chat requesting program-related details. I request you to get to our website, and all of the Impact Specialist program-related details are there for you to take a look at. Please go do that. You can write to us. Our emails are there in the chat box. You can write to us for any further information. Download the reports, the impact research reports, and thank you all for your participation today. Have a great day and stay safe.
Thank you.